Sonia Stone. The 27th of May, 1951 saw the birth of Sonia Stone. Originally from Quebec, Canada, Sonia immigrated to the United States in the 1970s and married Michael Stone there in 1976. The couple gave birth to a girl. Sonia and Michael Stone's marriage, however, did not continue long as they separated and became divorced. While working for the Levi-Strauss Company, Sonia Carmen Stone was a single mother in 1980, living alone with her 4-year-old daughter. After dropping her daughter off at school and doing a few errands, Sonia went back home on October 15, 1981. Sonia Carmen had a visit from her friend Caroline McBride at around 12 o'clock in the evening, after phoning her several times and not hearing back from her. When Caroline arrived at Sonia's home in the Carmel Point neighborhood in Monterey County, California, she discovered her friend Sonia Carmen Herrick's lifeless body right inside the front door that led to her living room. Sonia Carmen Horrock, 30, looked to be the victim of sexual assault. Her pocketbook and its contents were spilled near her body as she lay sprawled on the floor. Sonia had been found with her own pantyhose wrapped tightly around her neck, half-dressed and strangled. She had peeled back her jacket and ripped her shirt. Caroline was so scared that she dialed the Monterey County Sheriff's Office, and they sent officers to the location right away. The detectives concluded that Sonia was attacked as soon as she opened her front door to enter her house based on the posture in which she was discovered. Additionally, when they inspected Sonia Carmen's body, they found that she had a broken left ring fingernail with blood underneath, indicating that she had fought her killer and possibly even scratched him before she passed away. For years, the police and Sonia Carmen Herrock's family were plagued by the issue of who was responsible for the horrific crime. Before we continue, we want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch our videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy our content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now, let's move on with the video. By the next day, the police had canvassed the neighborhood, asking questions and speaking with everyone who had answered the knock on their doors in an attempt to gather information. One of the detectives spoke with a neighbor named Michael Scott Glazebrook while they were in the neighborhood that is just across the street from Sonia Carmen's home. The detective saw a 3 to 4 inch vertical scratch running down his right cheek at the time. He was 25 years old. He was asked how and when he received the scratch right away by the detective, but Glazebrook said contradictory things. While he claimed his parents he acquired it in a fight at Monterey Peninsula College where he attended school, he informed the detective he got it by cutting plexiglass in his garage. Michael Scott Glazebrook was held accountable for Sonia Carmen's death in 1982 because of his inconsistent behavior. However, the district attorney's office chose not to retry the case after the jury returned a 9-3 not guilty verdict at the 1983 trial. Whatever the jury's verdict, a retrial was still an option. But Michael Scott was freed and found not guilty. The case could not be investigated in the 1970s due to the lack of major DNA technology, and it remained unsolved for 39 years. The Sonia Carmen Stone's case was re-examined in 2020 by detectives from the Monterey County Sheriff's Office and Deputy District Attorney Matt L. Hero. They discovered that a number of the pieces of evidence in Sonia's case file might now be analyzed using contemporary DNA technology. The Department of Justice DNA Laboratory received these pieces of evidence, along with the DNA discovered beneath Sonia's fractured fingernail and on her right breast, for analysis. Investigators obtained a search warrant for a fresh sample of Michael Scott Glazebrook's DNA in 1981 since he was the top suspect on their list of potential suspects. Since Michael Scott Glazebrook was still working in Monterey County and was still alive, they had no trouble getting a new DNA profile. Following analysis, a DNA sample obtained from Michael Scott Glazebrook and one from the crime site belonging to Sonia Carmen Stone were compared. It turned out to be a contest right away. Subsequently, detectives monitored Michael Scott Glazebrook's home in the city of Seaside. On August 14, 2021, around 8 p.m., Glazebrook drove out of his house, but he was stopped and brought into custody. During Michael Scott Glazebrook's arrest, all cops donned Levi's jeans as a tribute to Stone. Glazebrook, now 67 years old, was found guilty of Sonia Carmine Stone's murder during an 8-day jury trial in 2023. He will be sentenced in April and might get a lifelong prison term without the chance of release. The 44-year-old daughter of Sonia Carmine Hiroke Stone remarked, "It's been a day that we have been waiting for a really long time," in response to Glazebrook's convictions. "We're delighted that Sonia received justice and she was a beautiful woman." Moving on to the next case. Thelma Boinville. On December 7, 2017, the sleepy Hawaii town of Pubkea on the North Shore learned of a dark secret. A horrible catastrophe shook the quaint suburb that day. The story of Thelma Boinville, a loving 51-year-old teacher, begins here. Until she accepted a part-time job cleaning holiday rentals, her life was typical. She had no idea that the typical day she was leading would turn into a nightmare that would change everyone around her. At a vacation home on Ke'ehi Road, the renters discovered her dead. As information surfaced, the community was engulfed in a web of unanswered questions, dread, and a desire for the truth. How did Thelma Boinville, an ordinary teacher in a sleepy Hawaiian hamlet, meet her horrifying end? What shocking revelations might we expect? Was her death caused by an accident or by murder? Thelma Boinville was inevitably impacted by Pubkea, a quaint community in Hawaii's North Shore's Kalawa district. In Hawaiian, a white shell that completely captures its immaculate surroundings is called a pubkea. Beautiful beaches in Pubkea are widely recognized for drawing surfers and beachgoers. This includes beaches like Waimea Bay and Sunset Beach. Three Tables and Sharks Cove are also great places to go snorkeling and diving. The village is tranquil, but because Thelma had to support her family, Pubkea severely changed her life, leaving a long-lasting effect on the neighborhood. The people of Hawaii's North Shore knew Thelma Boinville well as a loving mother and teacher. She was born in a small Brazilian town on February 4, 1966. Throughout her life, her curiosity and passion for learning remained central to who she was as a person. Thelma began her career at Sunset Beach Elementary School as a teacher. She wished to assist others as well as her kids. She recognized the value of education in fostering healthy brain development in children. Thelma thought that teaching was her ministry. Her commitment to teaching youngsters was well respected by her colleagues. Her classroom gently and supportively supported and nourished growing minds over time. Thelma was a dedicated teacher who went above and beyond to promote her students' achievement, according to her colleagues. Thelma's family came first in her mind. Despite her employment as a teacher, she worked part-time as a cleaner for North Shore Holiday Rentals to support her family. This demonstrated her strong work ethic and her dedication to her family. Thelma had a daughter named Miakana who was very important to her when she married Kevin Emery. Miakana was her friend, confidant, and child. Their close relationship demonstrated Thelma's unconditional love and nurturing nature. Makana turned to her mother for advice and encouragement. The village was forever altered by her presence, kindness, and love for her family and students. Unfortunately, she had no idea that fate had unexpectedly and disastrously turned against her. Beneath the idyllic surface of North Shore, Hawaii, was a horrific and unexpected catastrophe. Thelma Boinville was a dedicated educator. She enjoyed the solitude of North Shore. To support her family, she had a second job cleaning vacation houses in the region. She arrived at a vacation home on Ke'ehi Road, a typical neighborhood that had gained notoriety for its terrifying nature. Without Thelma knowing, this picture-perfect scene was turned upside down in the most surprising way. Thelma had cleaning responsibilities for the holiday rental while her 8-year-old daughter McKenna slept outside in the family van. Thelma Boinville had suffered violent incidents inexplicably while staying at the holiday rental. The rental house was being broken into by Stephen Brown and his girlfriend, Haley Dandurand, when she arrived. Something terrible happened on a regular workday that completely upended Thelma's life. Thelma attempted to repel the intruders, but as the struggle intensified, she was struck severely in the head. A violent act that seemed out of place occurred on the peaceful North Shore. Thelma waged a terrible battle for her life in the tranquility of the vacation house before she was taken from us. Her skull was brutally damaged by blunt force trauma, which was a sign of violence. She left a menacing trail of blood as evidence of the violence that had taken her life. The fear lingered even there. McKenna, her 8-year-old daughter, was unaware of the darkness. Her mother's return was always something she looked forward to. Her tranquility was short-lived when McKenna came under the attention of Haley Dandurand and Stephen Brown, two nasty crooks. She was put in a gag and restrained in the holiday rental, which sent her into a nightmare that no child should ever experience. Her trusting and innocent world came crashing down. The blackness of her kidnapper's wrath replaced the glorious Hawaiian light that had filled the automobile she was waiting in. Haley Dandurand and Stephen Brown tricked, physically restrained, and silenced McKenna. The small girl was forcibly told that her mother, Thelma Boinville, had died. McConnell's world collapsed around her, mercilessly shattering her innocence. Another horrific chapter in this terrible story of brutality and deception involved McConnell being kidnapped and given awful lies to eat. Stephen Brown and Haley Dandurand killed Thelma Boinville and seriously injured her as well. Officers conducting an investigation at the vacation home on Kiki Road in North Shore, Hawaii, discovered Thelma Boinville's lifeless body at approximately 3:20 p.m. local time following the report of the incident. Thelma was the target of a horrible murder. The kidnapping of McKenna, Thelma Boinville's daughter, and the case of her mother inspired a thorough inquiry aimed at achieving justice. Many lives were impacted that day by a distress call that the Honolulu Police Department and other law enforcement agencies received. Police found a terrible tragedy at the holiday rental on Keiki Road when they arrived. When they entered the rental, they found Thelma Boinville dead. A grim picture of what had happened inside was created by bloodstains and fight-related debris. The crime site was thoroughly examined before the inquiry began. Every bit of evidence was meticulously documented by forensic specialists who thoroughly inspected the holiday rental. Rebuilding Thelma's case and McKenna's kidnapping was the primary goal. The blunt force injuries to Thelma's head was a crucial piece of evidence recovered from the scene. This graphic detail highlighted how serious the crime was. Following their witness search, investigators had a conversation with McConnell. To safeguard her mental health, experts, including child psychologists, were consulted as she recounted that horrible day. McKenna's story was recorded in case it provided any hints about the enigmatic solution. Her memories of the offenders, their deeds, and their horrifying dishonesty bolstered the case. The world record for the greatest wave was set by Garrett McNamara, an American big wave surfer and Thelma's brother-in-law. McNamara was the first to ride a glacier wave and handle a barrel from Jaws. Owing to his moniker and Guinness World Records, he possessed a substantial social media following. Things improved after surfer Garrett McNamara posted an impassioned Facebook video and offered a substantial reward for the suspect's capture. In the video, McNamara, who claimed to be Thelma Boinville's daughter, offered $100,000 to anyone who could provide information regarding the horrifying murder that took place on Hawaii's North Shore at Keiki Beach. His passionate plea was extensively disseminated on social media. By threatening to give a large reward, he urged others to come forward with information. You may contribute to raising awareness of the need to resolve the case and prosecute the culprits by signing this petition. After McNamara's video went viral and raised public notice of the tragedy, many people provided leads, tips, and information. This information was very helpful to law enforcement in locating and apprehending the criminals. It was law enforcement that started the legal process. A thorough investigation was started by the Honolulu Police Department in an effort to identify and quickly catch the perpetrators. At the vacation house on Keiki Road, where the offender was caught, significant clues were found. The vacation house was meticulously searched by detectives looking for evidence of the murderer. They collected DNA fingerprints and other forensic evidence methodically in order to create a case against the criminal. As the research went on, the puzzle pieces started to fit. Witnesses like Thelma's daughter McKenna helped piece together what happened. McKenna's horrific story of her mother's murder and imprisonment revealed the culprit. Thanks to generous donations, increasing media attention, and McNamara's generous reward offer, The investigation was able to apprehend the murderers, Stephen Brown and Haley Dandurand. Stephen Brown was one of the primary suspects in Thelma Boinville's murder. His presence at the crime site and his involvement in the deadly burglary led to his incrimination when witness accounts, investigations, and forensic evidence were gathered. Stephen Brown was placed under arrest on December 8, 2017, just 7 hours later, in order to pursue justice. The arrest once again shocked the neighborhood, but this time it was accompanied by optimism and a pledge to hold the offenders accountable. Stephen Brown's testimony provided further insight into that very fatal day as the investigation progressed. Brown stated that he and Dandurand smoked marijuana before entering the vacation home through an open window. Thelma was instructed to lie down by Dandurand so that they could bind her when she entered. Brown's testimony raised questions for the investigators. Thelma did not appear to be defending himself based on his wounds or his bloody garments. Brown's horrifying narrative contradicted McKenna's. Deputy Prosecutor Scott Bell was certain that Brown alone could bring Thelma Boinville under control. Because of McKenna's claim that Brown told her they killed her mother, the inquiry was compromised. A complicated web of treachery, bloodshed, and grief in the bucolic North Shore. Justice seemed imminent as the parts of the jigsaw puzzle began to come together. Stephen Brown, the horrifying killer, came from a chaotic and violent family. Stephen Brown was 23 years old when he killed Thelma, who was born in 1994. His early legal troubles painted a bleak image of a young guy headed down a horrible path. Brown's severe criminal history makes it reasonable to be concerned about his potential for aggressiveness. Investigators probing his past were wary of this trajectory. Brown's girlfriend at the time of the crime, Haley Dandurand, was a mysterious 1997 native. She was 20 years old when the crime was committed. Dandurand's involvement in the terrible events of that day perplexed a lot of people. Stephen Brown was convicted of 2 kidnappings, murder, and burglary after a trial. The first of his act's consequences was his punishment. The legal process began following the arrest. The prosecution put together a strong case using witness statements, evidence from the crime site, and McConnell's graphic testimony. The trial became a struggle for justice, and the truth after the crime was made public. The jury rendered their verdict following a 6-year trial that detailed the grisly deaths and the events of that horrific day. Stephen Brown was convicted of assassination, kidnapping, and burglary after a contentious trial. Both the family of Thelma Boinville and the North Shore community found closure. Stephen Brown's legal path began with his conviction. He accepted his fate even though he knew he would most likely spend the rest of his days in prison. Justice was done. Both Thelma's family and the neighborhood would be scarred by the atrocity. The courtroom was buzzing with intense anticipation after a 2-week trial that captured the attention of the country and the North Shore. On Friday, January 20th, 2023, after a protracted trial, a jury comprised of 12 members with a variety of backgrounds delivered its verdict. Popke was a quiet village until the legal drama surrounding Stephen Brown, the main suspect in Thelma Boinville's murder in December 2017. The jury's decision changed the case after the trial lasted less than 30 minutes. Stephen Brown was acknowledged as having a major role in the sad events of that December day, even though he was convicted guilty of multiple offenses. Brown's accusations included 2 kidnappings, 1 burglary, and a 2nd decree killing in addition to his conviction for homicide. However, he received a life sentence without the chance of release. The ruling was overturned by the court. The prosecution carefully constructed its case by offering testimony and corroborating evidence that gave a graphic account of the events that took place at the vacation home on Kiki Road. Scott Bell, the deputy prosecutor, was adamant that Thelma Boinville was killed by Haley Dandurand and Stephen Brown. The prosecution claimed that Brown was able to physically restrain Thelma. The defense claimed that Stephen Brown was behind the break-in and kidnapping, despite his strenuous denials of any role in the murder. A court-appointed council member for Brown, William Bagasol, highlighted in the tragedy the differences between Brown and his girlfriend Haley Dandurand. Methodically, Bagasol revealed that Thelma had been tied up by Haley, who had no blood. Furthermore, he did not believe that Brown's DNA was connected to the weapons that were used to kill Thelma. Courtrooms functioned as settings for opposing narratives as well as emotional theaters. The population, stunned by Thelma Boinville's brutal murder, anxiously awaited the trial's verdict. The conviction and length of the trial tested the patience of the North Shore neighborhood. Following Stephen Brown's conviction, Thelma Boinville and her family experienced a major turning point in their search for justice after 27 shocks. The conviction gave the terrified community closure and paved the stage for the trial of Haley Dandurand, the second suspect in the case. The trial for Haley Dandurand started in July 2023. She was found guilty of burglary, kidnapping, and murder after a month of trial. She was given a life sentence in jail with the possibility of release by the jury. After the verdict, the North Shore community breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that a difficult phase of their journey had ended. However, the anguish endured by Thelma Boinville and her daughter McCanna will forever act as a warning of the evil that may exist even in the most favorable of situations. After Stephen Brown and Haley Dandurand's trial, the North Shore community and Thelma Boinville's family felt at peace. Justice was done following years of suffering, ambiguity, and uncomfortable memories of December 2017. The family found comfort in the sentence after losing their mother and teacher. Their persistent pursuit of accountability and the truth was upheld by the verdict. Moving on to the next case. Vicki Belk. In Prince George County, Maryland, Suitland is an incorporated census-designated place in the United States. Suitland's blend of urban and suburban areas makes it an ideal place to raise a family. The well-known parks in Suitland are a popular weekend destination for the town's liberal residents. Suitland is a lovely town, but in comparison, no matter how big the community, its crime rate is far greater than the national average. Tragically, a young mother was abducted and brutally murdered in Suitland in 1979, leaving behind her loving family. Vicki Belk was born on March 20, 1951, into the Belk family, which consisted of Lonnie and Maydell. The oldest of the 6 Belk siblings, Vicki was a loving big sister to her younger brother, Lonnie Jr., also known as Ricky, and to April, Brenda, Judy, and Kay. Like all of her siblings, Vicki grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. Vicki and her sister Judy became the first African-American pupils to attend the Minnie Howard Elementary School in Alexandria, Virginia after their parents, Lonnie and May, filed a successful case against the Board of Education school desegregation judgment. Vicki later earned her T degree. 1969 at C. Williams High School. Vicki was a child during the Civil Rights era. The Bell family was a family that was always willing to defend the rights of their community and themselves. They also stood by their moral principles. Even after being the victims of violence and losing a few fights, the Belk family continued to be role models for everyone in their neighborhood and for one another. Vicki was passionate about advocating for her area and speaking out, much like her family. Vicki was a role model for her siblings because of her generosity and thoughtfulness. Vicki graduated from college earlier than anyone in her family, at a time when chances for her and her community were scarce. Vicki earned a Bachelor of Arts in Education from St. Augustine College in Raleigh, North Carolina in 1974. Her skill in her chosen industry and her diligence paid off. She was employed in the Office of Operations and Finance of the Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. as a management analyst. In 1979, Vicki, a 28-year-old mother, was balancing work in Washington with raising her small son, Lyman Belk. Vicki's great-grandfather, Wesley Casey, co-founded Oakland Baptist Church in Alexandria, where she worked as a church secretary and Sunday school teacher. She continued to be involved in her community. Vicki's family was close to one another and communicated frequently. Early in August 1979, Vicki's whole family gathered at Oakland Baptist Church to celebrate Judy's marriage. Vicki's ex-co-worker and current lover, James Hill, accompanied her to the wedding. Vicki was Judy's maid of honor and helped with a lot of the event organizing. Vicki went back to her normal life with her lover, James Hill, who worked for the agriculture department, a few days after Judy's wedding. On August 27, 1979, Vicki and James got ready for the day as usual. They rode in James's 1972 Buick from their Prince George's County condominium to the Stadium Armory Station, where they parked and caught the rail to their offices. Vicki planned to finish the errands she had to undertake that day after lunch. She informed James that she would meet him in the parking lot following her shift that night. When James arrived in the parking lot following his workday, Vicki was not in sight. The vehicle was still missing. After waiting until dusk, James started to worry because Vicki was nowhere to be seen. That night, he attempted to contact a few of Vicki's close friends and relatives to inquire about any updates on her whereabouts, but none of them knew. After returning home, James waited for Vicki for hours, but she never appeared. On August 28, 1979, James tried to report his girlfriend Vicki missing early to the Prince George's County Police Department. However, the officers told him that since Vicki was an adult, an official complaint could only be filed 72 hours after Vicki's appearance. James was left with no choice except to wait and hope Vicki returned. James broke the news to Vicki's relatives. They all started to worry a lot, especially Vicki's mother Maydell. She couldn't believe what was occurring, so she went insane. Vicki's failure to check on her son and her odd lack of communication with her loved ones about her whereabouts were noteworthy. With her brave daughter gone, Maydell could only worry about what may come next. After a torturous 72 hours of waiting, Vicki's family came to the conclusion that something was gravely wrong as the day went on. On August 29, 1979, while out for a bike ride on Metropolitan Church Road, which is adjacent to Maryland's Route 227, a local adolescent lad noticed something unusual in the woods. When he looked it over more closely, he saw it was a dead body. He told his mother about the horrifying finding after riding his bike home, and she called the police. Police found a dead woman who had been shot in the head and was only half-clad when they got at the site. The body of the woman was identified as Vicki Lynn Belk, after she was brought to Baltimore's chief medical examiner. The official cause of death was homicide. The Charles County Sheriff's Office called Vicki's parents, Maydell and Lonnie, to let them know that they needed to come to the police department because they had some information regarding their daughter. It turned out that Lonnie and Maydell were quite cheerful on their trip to the police station. They thought maybe Vicki had been hurt recently and had been found. But when Maydell and Lonnie arrived at the sheriff's station, they were told the worst news. Their firstborn child, their eldest daughter, had been murdered and left for dead by the side of the road. Maydell was in so much anguish that she burst into tears right away. The man who had harmed her daughter was cursed by her. Vicki's family was inconsolable. The violent and chaotic nature of the incident deeply shocked them. They collected themselves and gave the case to the cops, hoping that Vicki's killer would be caught and treated justly. An investigation into the killing was initiated. Detectives were constantly gathering evidence and searching for clues, and the crime scene had already been secured. Among the things the investigators discovered were Vicki's brown shoes, stockings, jewelry, bra, and slip-and dress. A few hair samples and nail clippings were also discovered. The objects found at the crime scene were tested multiple times, but they turned out to be of little assistance to the investigators. The police conducted multiple interviews with Vicki's family, friends, and anyone who were close to the crime site. Even when certain leads were pursued, the inquiry didn't seem to be moving further. The day before she disappeared, Vicki had borrowed James's car to run errands, and the investigators were still looking for it, hoping it held clues that would lead them to her killer. After a few days, James's Buick was found abandoned in Washington, D.C. Sadly, unfortunately, the murderer's trail was entirely covered up. The police were determined to find Vicki's killer even if there was little new information in the case. All of the evidence was stored with the expectation that it may be retested using more advanced equipment. Over the next few years, as more and more cutting-edge technologies were being introduced, Charles County detectives worked with the Maryland State Police, Bode Technology in Lorton, Virginia, and Sorensen's Laboratories in Salt Lake City, Utah, in an effort to identify Vicki's killer and bring him to justice. But they encountered failure once more. The more time went by, the more the investigation into Vicki's attack and murder slowed along, and the identity of her killer remained a mystery. When Vicki was slain in 1979, there was insufficient technology and equipment available to examine DNA samples. The technology was first developed in the 1980s when law enforcement started to gather a large database of DNA samples and fingerprints from criminal suspects all around the country. Investigators in Vicki's case retested the material after DNA testing advanced a bit in the early 2000s. Upon closer inspection, it was discovered that Vicki's garment had an alien body material on it. As a result, the detectives were able to construct a potential suspect's profile. However, testing technology was far from perfect. Therefore, the generated profile was not suitable to be entered into any database or compared to any suspects. Years passed, and the detectives kept testing Vicki's belongings that they had found at the crime site using new technologies. Using forensic technology, the investigators were able to construct a DNA profile of a male whose body fluids were found on Vicki's dress in 2022 when her slip and dress were retested. This offered police enforcement some hope that the person who killed Vicki would be found and brought to justice. A comparison was made between the newly developed male profile and profiles in CODIS, the combined DNA index system. After carefully reviewing multiple profiles, the forensic team found a match in their database. The 61-year-old man named Andrew Taylor was the proprietor of this profile. Following notification of the findings to the sheriff's office in November 2022, investigators decided to look into Andrew's background, particularly his criminal history. Andrew, who is now elderly, was living in a rehabilitation and nursing home in Washington, D.C. at the time. Through close observation and relentless inquiry into his past, the police learned that Andrew had been living in his aunt's Charles County home when Vicki was killed. Even though Vicki's body was found less than 4 miles from the residence, Andrew eluded capture despite this information. The investigators still needed more solid evidence to link him to the horrific crime. In order to accomplish this, detectives went into Andrew's assisted living facility in March 2023 and acquired an arrest warrant for him. In order to obtain additional evidence, detectives questioned Andrew and collected a sample of his saliva for further comparison with the DNA recovered from the crime scene. Andrew knew from the surprise visit that he was being investigated for Vicki's murder, but the police weren't worried that he would flee the city because of his health. Even though the lab tests would take weeks to complete and the results would not be available, authorities knew he was staying put. Andrew's condition was quickly getting worse, and his amputated leg made it difficult for him to do much of anything. The confirmation of the DNA match with Andrew's profile was made again on June 16, 2023. He was accused of assault and first-degree murder. He was detained and given an order to be held without bond on June 22, 2023. At a press conference, Vicki's family and the detectives who worked her case spoke with the media. Vicki's family was devastated, living in the past as the results of the probe brought back bad memories. Judy Belk shared a fond recollection of her late sister, Vicki, and Lament Belk thanked the police. Ricky Belk, Vicki's brother, told of what transpired to his mother following the sad incident. Currently, it's unclear if Andrew has entered a plea. The Maryland Public Defender Office, who is representing him, chose not to comment on the situation. Vicki had never seen Andrew before, and his attack on her had not been prearranged. When Andrew did the heinous deed, he was just 18. Vicki was denied the chance to have a happy and meaningful life. Her death left her loved ones extremely devastated, but they also found some peace and closure knowing that her killer was now behind bars. Lament Belk, Vicki's son, graduated from Morehouse College and George Mason University School of Law in 2009 and became Cobb County, Georgia's Associate Director Attorney. Vicki's sister Kay worked as a surgeon for the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Office in California until she retired. Lonnie is a lieutenant in the Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Department, the only boy among several sisters. The Bell family created the Vicki Belk Scholarship Foundation in 1980 in memory of Vicki after her tragic death. The foundation grants scholarships in Vicki's honor. The mission of the Scholarship Board is to provide opportunities that continue Vicki Lynn Belk's legacy and assist in raising funds for graduating seniors at Oakland Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia, the church where she was baptized. So far, the scholarship program has awarded scholarships to almost 100 students from Oakland Baptist Church. Vicki's family wishes to continue her love of education among the youngsters of Oakland Baptist Church. Moving on to the next case. William Newton, William Newton's severed body parts were found in a West Hollywood dumpster in 1990 when he was 25 years old. The news of his murder rocked the small LGBT community to which he belonged, particularly as it came at a time when the HIV and AIDS epidemic was already taking a toll on the gay community. For over 3 decades, West Hollywood was plagued by this horrifying unsolved case. It was the Black Dahlia murder as told by the gay community. Investigators worked very hard throughout the years to solve the case, but they were unsuccessful for a long time. But 3 decades later, William Newton's case has been resolved by a group of amateur detectives. The case study for this case brings us to Los Angeles, widely regarded as the global hub for entertainment. Movie studios, the Sunset Strip, Venice Beach, renowned museums, theme parks, vineyards, breweries, outdoor activities, and a bustling nightlife are just a few of the many attractions and things to do in Los Angeles. People have found the city to be interesting over the years because it offers a lot to everyone. On July 26, 1965, William Arnold Newton was born in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. His parents lived apart and were not married. William's love for the arts was revealed as he grew older. Friends would frequently catch him penning poetry and other creative works that were a reflection of his soul and the natural world. William Newton considered himself to be an illustrative artist and poet, according to his friends. He possessed a great deal of talent. Richard Harriman, his father, once informed the press that his son was a bright young man. William Newton was born in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and lived there for the most of his childhood. He attended both junior high and primary school there. In 1979, after graduating from junior high school, he and his mother, whose name has never been mentioned in any records, moved to another Wisconsin community named Ladysmith. Their time in Ladysmith was brief, as William Newton and his mother relocated to Oklahoma City shortly after his first year of high school in 1980. William, who needed more stability, did not seem to be pleased with the abrupt and constant change in his surroundings. He then decided to move in with his father, Richard Harriman, and packed his belongings. He had the impression that his father would be overjoyed to have him. He was, after all, his son. However, such was not the case, as he received a startling welcome when arriving in Eau Claire, the home of his father. He was instructed to leave and return to his mother's house by his father. At 16 years old, William Newton felt crushed and shattered, but since he never gave thought to moving back in with his mother, William bravely decided to forge on and begin a new life on his own. William Newton traveled around the country for the next 3 years, arriving in Los Angeles in 1985. Oklahoma was one of the cities he called home. He met Terry Elliott there, and they struck up a romantic relationship during his visit. William decided to pursue a career as a professional beautician after discovering his love for makeup and beauty. He learned everything there was to know about makeup, skincare, and style. After finishing his training in cosmetics, he obtained his license as a beautician. William Newton began a new life in Los Angeles in 1984. Despite all of the difficulties and obstacles that come with relocating, William never had to wait long for possibilities. His strong resume, which highlighted his expertise as a beautician, helped him land a job in the entertainment sector making music videos very fast. William worked as a choreographer and a makeup artist. Not having a full-time career, he later got a second job at Hollywood Spa, a gay bathhouse. He met David Ray during a night shift, and the man liked his personality right away. David was rumored to have visited the area to judge a beauty pageant for a local homosexual publication. William's meeting with David served as just another stepping stone toward his professional zenith. Gay adult flicks were David Ray's specialty as an adult filmmaker. Seeing potential in William, David chose to support him, bringing him into the homosexual film industry and helping him get parts in a number of gay pornographic films. William and David's connection developed into much more than a business partnership over time. Following their romantic relationship, the two partnered to launch their own adult film company, London, in 1987. Ray produced content. William then began working in London. Ray worked as a set designer, makeup artist, and movie producer under the alias Bill A. London. Additionally, he performed in films under the identities Billy Porter and London. Ray Productions was a new company since London, and there wasn't much money to change the location of the film. In their apartment, David and William would film their films. William would frequently remodel the residence to make it special for each movie shoot. William and David began to lead the greatest lives possible as their film production began to take off and money began to flow. When they weren't filming, they would frequently go out to bars and clubs where they would party and enjoy themselves. This way of life persisted for many years until the two separated and began living apart in 1990. William had already made preparations to temporarily leave Los Angeles and relocate to Las Vegas, where his stepsister Michelle was living at the time, which was around October 1990. William, according to his sister, was in need of a mental health vacation at the time. He would have the chance to reconnect with his mother, who was planning to relocate to the area at the moment, in addition to taking advantage of the fresh and exciting chances that Las Vegas would present. But fate had other ideas for William, who never boarded the plane to Las Vegas despite having made plans and used his final days in Los Angeles to get ready for his departure. Rage Nightclub was a well-known nightclub in Los Angeles that William Newton visited one fateful October 28, 1990. He sat for a while in his preferred location in the club, enjoying his drink and watching people around him dance and have a good time. He felt liberated after a few shots and chose to join the group of clubgoers who were dancing and having a good time. As he partied into the night, letting free and enjoying himself, time passed quickly. After taking a few more photographs, he made the decision to head home as it was becoming late. He got up, stumbled, and made his way out of the nightclub. It was obvious to everyone who saw him that he was drunk. William managed to escape via the exit doors, but after that night he was never seen alive again. It looked like Monday the next day, and the people of Los Angeles began a new week, going about their regular business, completely unaware of the horrific murder that had taken place the night before. On October 29, 1990, that same morning, a homeless individual was going through the nearby dumpsters in an alley just behind Santa Monica Boulevard. He was either hunting for food to eat or just trash to locate. He went one by one up to the dumpsters. When he opened a specific dumpster, he found a plastic bag that looked rather sturdy. He ripped the package open, and the sight within completely shocked him. There was a human head and feet staring back at him. He'd searched dumpsters for years, but he had never seen anything so horrifying and terrible. He promptly secured the bin and informed onlookers of the horrifying finding. When the police eventually arrived at the site, they were able to positively identify William's severed head from the bin. In order to determine whether any more portions of William Newton's body could be located and recovered, the police investigated every other dumpster within a 2-mile radius of the finding site. But every search turned up fruitless. William was found to have been high on methamphetamine, an addictive narcotic, according to the results of his autopsy. In addition, the forensics found that prior to his murder, he had suffered blunt force injuries to his head and had been strangled. One of the investigators who arrived at the site and was horrified by how gruesomely William Newton's body had been disfigured was Wendy Byrne, a retired detective. Despite the fact that William was gay and employed in the gay adult film industry, she expressed her horror at the possibility of something like that happening. According to Wendy Burns, it didn't concern her. He wasn't deserving of dying in this terrible way. Following that, the Los Angeles Police Department launched an investigation into William Newton's case in an attempt to find information and leads that would clarify his specific circumstances and explain why his body parts ended up in a dumpster. The lead investigator on the team was Wendy Byrne. She ensured that she and her group gave William Newton's case their all, working non-stop. Investigators received hundreds of tips and leads about the case in the days and months after William Newton's body parts were discovered, but every lead resulted in a dead end. William Newton's remains were discovered in a neighborhood where investigators conducted interviews, but no one seemed to know who killed him or where his remaining body parts were located. After depleting all leads and tips, the investigators were left with nothing concrete to work with, and William Newton's case finally remained cold for an extended period of time. In 2005, 15 years after the murder, the Los Angeles Police Department made a public announcement announcing that they were going to reopen and reinvestigate the cold case of William Newton. They asked the public for leads and tips. However, the inquiry ultimately produced no useful results, and the case eventually became unsolved. But toward the end of 2006, Los Angeles reporter Mickey Ski reported that Richard Harriman had contacted him, telling him that the Los Angeles Police Department had not followed up on solving his son's murder case. This brought attention back to William Newton's case. After learning of this, the Los Angeles Police Department made a public statement stating that they were still actively working to solve the William Newton murder case and that they have not forgotten about it. In the unlikely event that the police wanted to notify Richard Harriman of any updates on his son's case, he had left an email address for contact. Sadly, he was unable to witness justice being served for his son's murder, since on May 30, 2011, he passed away at the age of 65 in his home. In 2020, two gay authors and best friends, Christopher Rice and Eric Shaw Quinn, were podcast hosts who became interested in William Newton's unsolved case. Christopher read about the case in an adult entertainment magazine, which is how they learned about it. Their imaginations had been fixated on the case ever since. They jointly started their podcast program, The Dinner Party Show, in 2012. Christopher Rice chose to bring up the William Newton case and the fact that there hasn't been an arrest since 1990 in one of the show's 2020 episodes. Christopher then made a last-minute plea to the audience to come forward with information or leads that could help William Newton's case get resolved. After a few months, Christopher Rice and Eric Shaw Quinn conducted another episode on William Newton's case in which they discussed all the new information they had learned about the case since their previous one. In the program, Christopher also shared that he received a message from a man named Ron Wheeler, who said he had crucial information about the case. Ron Wheeler revealed to the podcasters that he had also been at the Rage nightclub on October 28, 1990, the same night William Newton had gone before he was killed. He claimed to have witnessed William exiting the club with a different man who resembled renowned American gay serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. Before being apprehended in 1991, 9 months after the horrifying murder of William Newton, Jeffrey Dahmer had killed 17 boys and men in the Milwaukee region between the 1970s and the 1990s. After that, he received 16 life sentences. Although Jeffrey Dahmer's profile suggested that he might have killed William Newton, it was impossible to verify that since he had already passed away in jail in November 1994 after being attacked and beaten to death by another inmate. Following his disclosure of the information he and Eric Shaw Quinn had uncovered regarding William Newton's case and its potential connection to Jeffrey Dahmer, Christopher Rice expressed hope that someone would soon get in touch with them with information and proof that would enable them to apprehend William Newton's killer. Detective John Lamberti became interested in the William Newton case about the same period. After reviewing every piece of evidence, document, and file his forebears had utilized, he was taken aback by how much work they had put into the case. John Lamberti then started examining the case in great detail from all aspects, using the work of his predecessors as a reference. While looking into the case, he Googled William Newton's name and found the most recent podcast episode featuring Eric Shaw Quinn and Christopher Rice, who theorized that Jeffrey Dahmer was William Newton's murderer. After listening to the program, Detective John Lamberti became more intrigued by the case. He then got in touch with Christopher and Eric to arrange a meeting. 3 of them spoke in depth about the subject at the meeting, revealing what they knew about it. By the end of the meeting, they both agreed that the mystery surrounding William Newton's murder case needed to be solved. It seems that the 3 men were not the only ones who found William Newton's case intriguing. At around the same time, Rachel Mason, a documentary filmmaker, became interested in the case and began working on an underground investigation. While working on a well-liked Netflix documentary about a gay adult bookstore called The Circus of Books in 2017, Rachel coincidentally learnt of William Newton's death. In search of real, substantial material for the documentary, she went to see local writer and activist Mike Zemansky. Mike agreed to let her go through all of his old collections of West Hollywood pictures. An article on William Newton's murder case from 1990 accidentally slipped out while Rachel and Mike looked through the notebooks and photo album. Rachel couldn't stop staring at it. She snatched it up and saw that the article discussed William's murder and the fact that no one had been arrested as of yet. When she requested Mike for further details on the case, he kindly gave her the rundown on what he knew so far. Rachel Mason became interested in the case right away, but she had to finish the documentary for Circus of Books first. After completing the documentary, she started searching for other projects to work on. Then she recalled reading about William Newton's situation in an article at Mike's place. She gradually started to examine the case in greater detail, and eventually she developed an obsession with it. She made the decision to begin her own covert investigation as she couldn't stop thinking about the issue. She was determined to gather all the information necessary to resolve the issue while she was at it. Then, on a Facebook page for a gay community group, Rachel made a public appeal for anyone with helpful information or ideas that could lead to the resolution of William Newton's case. She also requested information on Jeffrey Dahmer's whereabouts during the 1990s William Newton murder incident. After some time, she got a message from a Sherman Oaks resident called Clark Williams. Married and a stay-at-home father of 2 LGBT children, Clark Williams claimed to be bored after his daughter departed for college and used a Facebook group dedicated to Wisconsin's gay history to rekindle old friendships. Similar to William Newton, Clark Williams grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and became interested in solving the case because he thought he could help Rachel Mason fill in the details of William Newton's lifestyle prior to his passing because he had a unique perspective on what it was like to be a gay child growing up in Wisconsin at the time. Then he contacted Rachel to inform her that Jeffrey Dahmer had never killed anyone outside of Milwaukee and Ohio. Rachel Mason was happy about the latest development in the case and appreciated the tip. She sought someone who understood a lot or little about William Newton's life story because she planned to write a documentary on his case. She got in touch with Clark Williams right away to see what he had to say. Clark Williams said at the meeting that he felt a connection to William Newton's case because of their common experiences after reading about it on a Facebook forum. They were born in the same year, which was another thing that made them gay. Clark stated, "We were born only a week apart." There was no denying Clark's emotional connection to the case. That's the reason he decided to step in and provide his assistance in whatever manner he could. Billy Newton was a genuine individual, someone who lives in my neighborhood. Additionally, I wanted to treat Billy fairly. Clark informed the reporters that he wanted to be remembered for his life as much as his death. Thousands of gay men in America lost their lives in 1990 as a result of the AIDS crisis, and William Newton's murder was a reflection of the lives of many gay men and youths at the time. He assured Rachel that he would personally devote more attention to the investigation after telling her everything he knew about the LGBT community at the time of William Newton's death. In 1990, he traveled to Fresno, the mother of Jeffrey Dahmer, and asked acquaintances in Milwaukee some questions that would help solve William Newton's case, but he received no response. When Clark Williams follows up on a lead in the investigation, he gets in contact with Detective John Lamberti. After that, John Lamberti, who was appreciative of the work, included Clark and Rachel in the inquiry. Because the Los Angeles Police Department lacked the tools necessary to crack the case at the time. In his free time, Clark would frequently sit down to study William Newton's case. Having worked in gay adult films, Clark decided to change his attention and go into the world of gay pornography in an attempt to find any leads. Soon after, he came upon Rick Pasquay, who had pretended to be a private detective investigating William Newton's death at the time of the murder. However, he never revealed that he had spent 20 years working in the gay porn industry. Clark started looking into the life of Rick Pasquay. He learned that The Devil and Danny Webster was a pornographic movie he had directed and that his true name was Richard Lawrence. This gave Clark the advantage he needed to win the case. Rick Pasquay and William Newton had been employed in the same business in 1990. Thus, he made the decision to get in touch with Pasquay to ask for advice on what might have happened to William Newton. But Rick Pasquay had now passed away, so Clark was unable to speak with him. But he did his homework on the characters of the movie he directed, searching for people who could be living and willing to narrate tales about William Newton's life. Subsequently, he saw that the film had a still living individual named Billy Houston. After conducting a thorough investigation into Billy Houston's biography, Clark found that he was a fresh and exciting addition to the gay adult film industry. Darrell Lynn Madden was his true name. Subsequent investigation showed that Darrell Lynn Madden was still alive and incarcerated on life sentences, after murdering Bradley Qualls, one of his friends, and 2 other gay males. When Darrell and Bradley Qualls went out one fateful night with a threatening plot to initiate Bradley Qualls into their skinhead cult group, the Chaos Squad Skinheads, Darrell claimed that they had committed the first murder. They had to kidnap and murder a gay man for the initiation in order to accomplish this. Then, Darrell and Bradley quietly waited for the poor gay man to pass by while lurking about the streets of Oklahoma. Eventually, one Stephen Domer fell victim to their death trap. Then, Darrell and Bradley tricked Stephen into going to a desolate place. He was handcuffed in his own vehicle and driven to a location where he would be easily assassinated. Stephen pleaded, cried, and struggled to have his life spared. However, he was ultimately defeated by 2 strong guys who used his own coat hanger to strangle him to death. Darrell and Bradley killed him and dumped his body in a nearby creek. Then, in a startling change of events, Darrell pointed a gun at his friend and accomplice, Bradley, murdering him instantly for an unidentified cause. After that, Darrell left Bradley's body behind and ran off. Nevertheless, he was unable to conceal his misdeeds for very long, as he was apprehended and forced to deal with the fallout. After being deeply taken aback by Darrell Lynn Madden's character, Clark Williams resolved to learn more about his life in Oklahoma. Afterwards, he discovered that Darrell had previously participated in an interview for the book American Honor Killings. Because of the book's limited availability, Clark chose to order it in order to read it and gain insight into William Newton's situation. Before Clark could eventually receive it at his doorstep, he had to wait for quite some time. Clark snatched up the book with excitement and started turning the pages. He was taken aback by what he eventually read. Darrell Lynn Madden discussed killing another gay guy in Los Angeles during the interview, in addition to killing Bradley Qualls and Stephen Domer. However, he omitted information about the crime from the book. However, given that William Newton was gay and had died in Los Angeles, Clark was ecstatic that Darrell might be alluding to him. Clark fervently believed that the murderer of William Newton was going to be identified at last. Clark called investigator John Lombardi to confirm this information, and they met to go over what Clark had discovered. 2 weeks before to Clark's report, John Lombardi's cold case section had reopened the William Newton file. Needless to say, he wasted no time in alerting his colleagues to the latest development in the case. They set to work, conducting study on Darrell Lynn Madden's lifestyle in 1990. During their investigation, they learned that the gay film company Darrell was employed for at the time was situated on Santa Monica Boulevard, which seemed to be the same route where William Newton's body parts were discovered. The leads were starting to pile up. However, on January 4, 2023, Detective John Lamberti traveled to Oklahoma, where Darrell was serving a life sentence for his crimes, along with Detective Tamara Momias, in order to gather information. Upon arriving at the prison, they discovered that Darrell Lynn Madden had transformed into a proud transgender woman named Darrellyn and was now an Orthodox Jew. She was willing to respond to any questions the 2 detectives threw at her as she sat comfortably across from them. When Lombardi and Momias questioned Darrellyn about William Newton's murder during the interview, they were taken aback by how quickly she was able to recall his identity. Darrellyn reported to the detectives that she and her friends, who were skinheads, had seen William strolling down the street the evening of his murder in October 1990. She clarified that they thought William would be a simple mark for robbery because of his apparent inebriation. Darrell acknowledged that she had gone up to William, put her hands around his shoulders, and whispered to him that they were going to abduct, rob, and hopefully beat the very hell out of him. But as long as he didn't cry out for aid or make a commotion, he would get out of the situation alive. The coroner at the scene verified that she had actually killed him by strangulation. Thus, regrettably, the last statement was false before his body was dismembered. When Darrellyn told detectives Lombardi and Momias about the incident, they were confused. They went on to question her about the reason for William Newton's body being cut up and dumped in a dumpster. But Darrellyn insisted it had nothing to do with her. She claimed that when they killed William, she left his body with her companions. Dandurand declined to provide the names or identities of the two acquaintances when the investigators asked for them, claiming, "I might be a murderer, but I am not a snitch." Detective John Lamberti, who already had all he needed to solve the William Newton case, submitted a strong case against Dandurand to Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon's office in the days that followed her confession. To their dismay, George Gascon informed them that there was insufficient evidence to indict Dandurand, thus they would not be pressing any charges against her. Detective John Lamberti and other amateur investigators who had put in many hours on the investigation were nevertheless pleased that William Newton's case had been resolved and that his perpetrator was now serving a life sentence. This was despite the tragic conclusion of the case. When the investigation was eventually concluded, Michelle Oliver, William Newton's stepsister, expressed her gratitude for the investigators' and amateur sleuths' efforts in looking into her brother's death. Michelle mentioned that having some sort of closure is helpful. The bereaved sister, however, was still in search of explanations for why Dandurand and her companions had targeted her brother and the location of the remaining body parts. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with us. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps us bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like us to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.